We're into the Akdama of the Rambam. We were doing the description of how everything was taught. Okay, we are now Hine L'cham Mashal. That's where we're up to. Do you have that paragraph with yourself? Look at the piece where it says, oh, see, I have a different translation here. I'll try to find it for you people. Where would that be? Oh, you have it. Hine L'cham Mashal. Good. Very good. Hine L'cham Mashal, now I'll give you an example. Amar lo Hashem, Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe in Sinai, or wherever we mentioned what Sinai is, but Sukkot Shvishivat Yamim. You must sit in the sukkah for 7 days. V'gam Hodiel, Hashem, God also notified him, the celestial God notified him, Shesukazu, Chovat Ascharim, V'lo Kivot, there's an obligation of male, it's not a female. Ve'na Chova Lacholim, there's not a Chova for people which are sick, which is called Nistayah, but they're not sukkah, V'lo Chedrachim, or Chedrach, all these sukkahs are Gemara, this all Kadosh Baruch Hu told Moshe at Sinai. The Gemara is going to ask me, no one, Mechtesi, but the halacha basically was given at Sinai. Basically, schach has to be something which is not kabul tumen, natural growth. Okay, good to know. No, although it's natural, even with ropes, why? Because it's kabul tumah. Also, all this Moshe heard at Sinai. Ukigon machzalaot, for example, carpets, v'abgadim, v'achila, v'ashtiya, v'ashena. Also, except Abgadim, period. Also, ha'achila, shtiya, v'ashena, eating, drinking, and sleeping. You, b'kol shivat yamim, you must be there for all 7 days. V'lo yeh chalila pachot mishivat tvachim, chalala. What's the word? What? No. The space of the cubic space of the sukkah must be not less than 7 tvachim length and 7 tvachim width. It has to be a 7 by 7. That's its space, okay? Halal is the space. Sorry, it shouldn't be less than usual tefachim. This was said. The Gemara says why. The Gemara explains the Rasrucha. There are different reasons, as I explained in previous learning. The Svaros and the Psukim are to give the Agdora to allow to extrapolate. But the Ikar Adin was already given at Sinai. Okay? And when the apostle, which is Moshe Rabbeinu, came, when he came to Sinai, he received this mitzvah and all of its interpretation and explanation. And likewise, this is, we just learned this, mitzvahs. Moshe received all 613 of this mitzvah, the mitzvahs per se, upirushem, and their commentary and their interpretation. So get this straight. Torah Shabbat means literally, as we said it, HaMikra, Katuv, the Mikra would be written, Bimgilot. They were written in Gilot at the moment. Why? Because as we mentioned, the Sefer Torah, the way we know it, only came into final being in the last month of his life at the end of the 40th year. That's when he wrote the Sefer Torah as written in Parshas Vayelech. And I mentioned the Ramban already said that even then it wasn't finalized until the last day of his death, before he was walking up to the mountain. And he said, V'zeh bracha, Kadosh Baruch Hu pulled it back and said, listen, this also, you should write your brachas, you should also write in the Sefer Torah. And they had to take back the Sefer Torah from the Levium and from the Bnei Yisrael. That he give it to them before. They took it back, he added to it, and then returned to them. All this is a Ramban, which is worth seeing, Mistam at the end of Vayelech, the end of Hazinu, and our beginning of this bracha. So that's what that, in the meantime, it was called Megillot. V'kashei Yigeh Sefer Ba'im Shana. At the end of the 40th year, B'Rosh Chodesh Shvat, actually on the Rosh Chodesh of Shvat, he kilam alav shalom, he convened all of them. Now that's a pretty big convocation. Now you can understand why they needed trumpets and horns. I mean, Yud Beis Mil is a shtickle, that's you're learning now, right? Hamid Beis, Machni, so it's Yud Beis Mil. That's a lot of people, okay? He kilam, v'amarlem, he said to them as follows, Hein karvu, we have 5 weeks left of my life. Hey karvu yamai lamut, the days of my death are coming near. L'chein thus, mi sheshamami meni eze kabbalah. Anyone heard from me some kind of a tradition, something that we would call the Baal Peh. Because what's written you have in your Megillot. What if you heard from me something, Kabbalah means by the tradition, the receiving, by the tradition. V'shakcha, you forgot it. Yavov v'nevarena, come and I will clarify it to you. Okay? In other words, he's not sure what he heard. So here, in other words, okay, this is very more than possible. At the end of the day, we're talking about an oral tradition, which was not written, okay? Was not written, and they had to remember a ton of information. If anything, you may have forgotten. I mean, I hate to say, they give a bechina on Sanhedrin at the end of the winter. I'd like to ask, mi shachach, mi zachar. Okay, and here you're talking about, it's an unbelievable amount of information, right? And it says over here, Misha what happens if one is not sure? Oh, I heard I'm not sure. I'm not sure of the Havana. I'm not sure of understanding it. There's a difference between forgetting and lack of a fine-tuned understanding. So that's the second thing. Lack of fine-tuned understanding. This should be enormous amount of people asking a deeper lumdus. And I'll explain to him. So can you imagine how many students this man had? As we said before, the minimum is 600,000 males from 20 and up. We're talking about a much larger number because, as I said before, the women also had to know. There was no Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, there was no Nidchi Yisrael of the Chavetz Chaim, there was no, I remember when my wife was engaged, so they weren't allowed to learn the Mishabur inside. The head of Dov Sternbuch used to say the halachas. Balpan used to take dictation. I remember when we first got engaged, I saw her halacha. She took dictation for Dov Sternbuch. He was a teacher engaged to Sam. His brother is Moshe Sternbuch, the Ravid of the Eidach, right? His other brother was Reb Elia Sternbuch, was the Dayan in Antwerpen. So Reb Dov was taught in Gates at Sem, and they wouldn't see the books inside, you understand? Well, but then it was no problem. Then there was no discrimination because there were no books inside, so everyone was doing oral. So men and women were doing the same thing. They had to know the halachas. I'm sorry. A lady asked to know, Hilchas doesn't have no Hilchas Tefillin. She's part of Hilchas Tefillin. But she had to know all the halachas of kashrus. Shchita, you think the shchita is not just, and a cave is kosher the shchita. Mechitesi, she wasn't a shchita. You think she had a chicken, she wanted to eat, she slaughtered it. She had a shchita, she had no basavacholov, she definitely had to know, you know what I mean? And if she was doing business with her man, she had no hichas mekechamemker and kinyanim and toyin v'nit and v'chul. She didn't have to know, she didn't have to be a judge. Hichas ribis she had to know. What was she going to do? I mean, she knew as much as her husband. They both didn't have books. They both had to know. So the women had to know. The children from Bar Mitzvah have to know. So you're talking about an enormous amount of people, okay? He comes, he has, how many weeks does he have? He comes on Rosh Chodesh, he has 5 weeks in which he has to have people clarifying things after 40 years. I just want to take the thing there. Okay, what else did he do in that period of time? Well, let's see a little further. You'll see in a minute. Amar Katuv, this is the pshat in the pasuk, beginning of Dvarim. It says, Hayil Moshe be'eretz ha'Torah zois. What does that mean? He explained to those who needed explanation. That's the beginning of Parashat Dvarim. If you look at that pasuk, that's what he explained to those who needed explanation. He wasn't just going to chazer kol Torah kula. Come on, man, I did this already 5 times. You've been doing this for 40 years. Hopefully you know something. There's also Sori HaTzoros and the Sori Meis. Remember we learned that. And there's also the Rosh Hashvatim, the Skanim. There are a lot of people that were doing this, okay, as we learned in the previous paragraph, which we're learning this and everybody b'toch Ohalim. So what happened is he asked this question. V'chachamru chachamim b'sifri. He quotes the Sifri. This is his Walker. It's the Sifri, I think, it's Veschanan. Kol mish being a dvar, kol mish shechach halacha echad, yavo v'yishaneh. V'kol mish yesh lefaresh, yavo yifaresh, either forgetting or clarification. Ubiru mipiv a Kabbalah. They clarified from his mouth the exact tradition. Vilamdu hapirushim kol oto azman shemirish chodesh shvat ad shvi ba'odah. It would seem to be a major chazorah. There was a big chazorah of everybody. This is a 5-week chazorah of the big yeshiva. And the yeshiva said, whoever has problems, I'm around. Okay, that's how much time did he have? Let's say he didn't eat and didn't sleep. Let's say there's 24 hours. Granted. 24 hours, 5 weeks. What is it, 1 million some odd students? Okay, just think of this, okay. Now, what else he did do in this 5 weeks? Let's remember, he also said Sefer Dvarim. Sefer Dvarim is a major speech. Now, this is Moshe Piatzme Amma means that he had it Piana. And he said it, but it's if you look carefully, Sefer Dvarim is 5 big drushes. Not just that. What else did he do? And this is the big one. Look at the next paragraph. He was busy writing. He wasn't writing Chidush Torah, but he was writing Sifrei Torahs. Because of 13 Sifrei Torah. Kulam gvilim min beit bereishis ad lamad Yisrael. V'nazan sefer l'chol shevet d'shevet. You should ask Reb Moti. He's a Sefer Stam. How long does it take to write a Sefer Torah? He had 5 weeks, he had to write 13 of them. Obviously, the man had, and if he does it, Bashboris Kumus with a shame, it's supposed to be a Sefer Torah. So it has to be a real Sefer Torah. So it means he actually had to do it. He was obviously very strong, very gifted, very perseverant. He probably didn't sleep, probably didn't eat. Now, how much time did he have? Now take 5 weeks, in which he's going to say all of Sefer Dvarim, write 13 Sefer Torah, and clarify and answer questions in the Kabbalah Sinai for, let's say, 1.5 million people. How many questions were there? By default, there couldn't have been too many questions because he didn't have time. I mean, the objective amount of time to write a Sefer Torah, we know. Okay, Lemaisa, it should take 5 weeks for one Sefer Torah. He was a speed writer, he did 13. Granted, okay? It doesn't say anywhere he did it with Shluchim. Okay? Nisasi B'Ksiva, he did it. Unless we're going to say it meant he opened up a school of scribes and he supervised. That is a possibility. Maybe. I'm just trying to give possibilities. But even, let's say that would be true. So that means to say, to give him more time. But if we're going to learn the Gemara Kipshutai, that means, no, he wrote 13 Sefer Torahs. If he wrote 13 Sefer Torahs, Mardukul Alma, how much time did he have to clarify the teachings of these people? I don't know. Make your own cheshbon. There's only 24 hours in a day. There's 5 weeks. He's dying on the last day. He also has to say Pesach Bracha, okay? And he has to do all this. Kamas man yeshlo. Look, I'm a teacher. I know what it takes to answer a question, to set someone straight. But I thought you said, oh, no, that again. And then he has to go explain. You know, right? It takes time to, even when you want to roll over a person, it takes time. No, he's got 1.5 million students. What's mukhrach mikan? That there were very few questions. That's mukhrach mikan. Mukhrach mikan, there were very few questions. That means that the educational system really worked. That's what it means to say. It means what you described in the previous column of the educational system of the 40 years in the desert, of the 5 times Kol Kula, everybody, and then the Soria Luf and the Soria Meis went to the Olim, and they Chazers, and they did 40 years of learning. It means to say that it actually worked. That's the Nakuda, which is so important here. This seems to be saying that when you talk about you believe in a tradition of Kabbalah Messina, it's not just a one-time reality. It's not some day in Sivan, hey, it was it Vav or Zayin, Amachleikis as usual. Was it Friday or Shabbos? Amachleikis between the Midrash, if you really want to know. We Paskin Halacha, it was actually not on Shabbos. Why? Because we Paskin Halacha that we say Zman Matar saying on Vav Sivan, and Vav Sivan was Friday. Then according to Bavli, and they hold the Bezeh. If you know this, maybe you should know it. One day in the Shavuos, I'll show it to you. Lemaisa, we Paskin Halacha that like the Picketer Beloza that Matan Torah was given on Friday. If you really want to know, that's why the Chinuch says it's called Yom Matan Torah Seinu. You know, according to the Bavli, it was given on Shabbos, which since we know when Yitzis Mitzrayim was, and the Gemara makes a cheshbon, so Shabbos was actually Zayin Sivan. You know, the Sheni Shagol is. But you know what I mean? It was very nice, but the problem is we do it Vav Sivan, okay? And that we Paskin like the Picketer Beloza. Just want you to know, but whatever it is, doesn't matter. These people, it wasn't just a one-day occurrence. It had to be something. It really was something. Was national. It went on for 40 years and was successful. That's the Nakuda I want. So your faith in the story of Revelation of Sinai is not just a one revelation of Sinai. It's a 40-year successful educational experience, which is the basis of your religious beliefs. That's really what it is. Now, when you're talking about a nation experiencing 40 years of clarity to the extent it doesn't have that much questions to ask, that's unprecedented anywhere in history. Now, if we have an ongoing flow of major league people living, breathing, and talking, and this history, you know, you can't suddenly tell us a story that there was a whole nation living for 40 years and studying, and this we have that comes from there. This is something, you know, it's unprecedented in history. It doesn't exist. I was mentioning some today. I, at a certain period of time, wanted to understand history of religions, and I, you know, studied a little bit about the histories of certain other religions in the Western world since I'm on there, so I don't think I'm going to elaborate. This may be incriminating. At the end of the day, there is no religion in the Western or Eastern world which is based on a historical collective phenomena which went on corroborated by major thinkers, giants of thought that we know. We know the writings. We study them. We bring our back to them. Such an ongoing, unbroken chain from, I would like to say, from the Chaznish, that's my hero, all the way till Moshe Messina, with names and addresses and their students. And you open up till this time, I know their wives' names, I know this, I know everything. I actually so much know about their thought by reading it. I study them, okay? And this goes all the way there. It's an unbelievably uncorroborated, there isn't a historical phenomenon in the human epic which is more corroborated than this collective experience of 40 years in the deserts. I want you to know that this happens to be, for me personally, a cornerstone of my faith. It's actually a faith, it's not faith, it's history. So I want you to understand that. Other people obviously wouldn't know this because they weren't privy to this and weren't part of this, and we didn't send out emails to the world. And believe me, no one knew what the Jews were doing in them clouds. Okay? It was a private affair, but those who are part of this historical epic, and your learning is a continuity of that historical epic. That's actually what you're doing. That's why when you make Birchas Torah, what's your bracha? Not Birchas Mitzvahs. Shebacher bana v'nasa lana terasa. We too are part of that choice of the Jews, and you have given us the Torah. We're part of the Shoshel Samasar. That's exactly, the Moshe Kibbutz Torah Messina, there's a list, and it ends up with good old Mr. Khan from Muncie. You understand? That's where it ends up. And I told you, like Calvin and Hobbes. History ends up with you. Now it depends what you do with it, but that's what this is. Weiter. So he says, I repeat, that is something which Lamais is a Shiloh in the Gemara. There's a day in the Gemara, the last 8 psukim were written by Yeshua, but it's Nidchem Ha'alacha, the Rambam Paschal's Ladin, and if you believe that you're not because for in the Chet L'Mabah. So don't think it's an option, but no, the Rambam is Machriya, that also the Ramban, if you really want to know. Although I know some ex-smart who love saying that you're very nice, burn in hell, it's okay with me, but no problem. But for Shiramal Halacha, that if you believe that any ois achas minatayr from Bereshis Bizla Enikol Yisrael was not me Moshe, listen me Kosh Bochel the Moshe, you ein lechekol l'mhava. I just want you to know that. That's a sometimes it's not divrei Agada. In other words, this is divrei Emuna, which is Achroy. There's not one Rishon that's Machriya that way. But we have to understand. But the shaila is, when was this written, etc. That's not Pasha. I told you to look up the Ramban. It's not that Pasha. The idea of Ad Einikel Yisrael is written in 2 stages. The Chatchili wrote until V'zeh Bracha. Before actually to Azinu. He gave Sefer Torah, then he said Azinu, then he told him to write that too. After he wrote that, then he told him 1 minute, you're about to die today, so say the bracha, so V'zeh Bracha. He stood by the mountain, said V'zeh Bracha, was told to go back, write it. I don't want to ask, you can look it up. I don't know what's clarifying, people can look at it. Be Ramban on that. What?
What about the Ezra involved that some things weren't from
I'd rather not comment I don't think you're well versed enough for me to discuss this. Be honest, okay? Okay, that's a typical quotation from, I heard someone. That's really what it is. We're going to leave it at that. I'm going to say bluntly, Rambam Paschal's La'alacha, and also the Ramban, that Ein L'chekol L'mhaba. Now you can take it wherever you want it. I'm not interested. Right. Okay? So he says, Nasan Sefer L'choshevish Yisnaig Al Pi V'ashloishis, the 13th Sefer Nasan L'Leviim, V'omer Lehem L'kech the Sefer Torah Azos. And this was the famous Sefer Torah that I mentioned in the previous class, that from here, the Rambam points out that used to be my gear Sefer Torah from this Sefer Torah. This was called Sefer Torah Shem Moshe, which was found in the Migdash. There's a very famous Sefer Torah, which I mentioned in another class, which was found during the renovations after the death of Menashe during the time of the Yisrael. And there are obviously certain akademics which would come and say, we see here that they didn't have the Sefer Torah, it was found in Nevi'im, and there was no Bible. Religion was created only from that period of time and further. I can tell you, if we're not doing that today. But it's all based on lack of understanding and knowing culture and context. That Sefer Torah that they found was the Sefer Torah Shebamigdash, the famous Sefer Torah Shebamigdash. It was the Sefer Torah Shemoshe. So obviously during the period of Menashe, when the Migdash was in disarray, it was lost, and they found it. That's the famous Sefer Torah which was found, which afterwards Chulda and Nevi'ah said they gave a prophecy, whatever happened. That's what they found. This Sefer Torah that was given to the Levium, which was afterwards put in the Beis HaMikdash. Right. At that day, on Zayin Adar, Allah El Ahar, B'chetzi Yom Shvi B'Adar, he went up to the mountain midday on the seventh day of Adar, Kamoshes Bar Kabbalah, has been clarified in our tradition. There's a beautiful line here of Rambam. Moso biyachas eleinu. It is his death in relationship to us. Why? We call him dead. Shenifkad mi'itanu, because he's been removed from us. But v'chayim biyachas elav. This is perceived going to a higher level of life. Vasis was b'meshen elav, the fact that he rose to God. In other words, so death is a relative term. He points out. Death is we call something death because it means removal, fini, complete, over, finita la commedia. Okay, that's something, that's death. But actually, as far he who lives the life of Moshe, that's not death, that's not finito adrabah. It's ilui to go to a higher stage of. I still remember as a child when Journeys, they had this song based on an article by Reb Michal Tukachinsky. Reb Michal Tukachinsky is the one the Menahel of Moses Eitz Chaim, big Talmud Chacham, and he wrote the Luach when people had the Luach of Eretz Yisrael. I don't know if you've seen different shows that he was the one, a lot of Piskei Halachas there. He was the Baki Gadol in nets and Zmanim. It said most of the Zmanim in Eretz are based on his calculations. So Michal also has a book on Nebuchadnezzar, Bikur Cholim, Avois Ameis, and Nichem Avelim. It's called Gesher Achaim. They printed in English too. So the third volume is basically more. The first volume is halachas. The second volume is tshuvas and mechkorim. The third volume also a lot of shmus and musar about chaylit and libor. So there he has a famous. He talks about death. He talks about, so to speak, that there are two feti found in the womb, and they're actually they're twins and they're in the same, so to speak, cilia, and they experience each other. Everything, whatever their experience is, they experience, okay? And then all of a sudden, something starts shaking, and one of them leaves. And this poor guy, the other one is like stays. That means he's not going to live too long. You know, he's actually being born. And the one who leaves, he's being born. And he's crying, and the guy inside says, oh, you poor guy, you're dying, and I'm living here. So I still remember Journeys. There was I think they had a song on that. I'll never forget that. I forget what it's called.
Conversation in the womb.
What?
Conversation in the womb.
Could be. Okay, so see, this is, I heard it somewhere. This is not my Yankis. This is already later in life. I remember heard it. And it was very sweet how they dramatized this idea. And this was literally the understanding of Meis klapenu v'chai klape atzmo. Okay, Meis klapenu, yeah, for the fetus which will not be born, which ultimately be a nafel, the one which is born was called Meis klapav. Oh, poor guy, he's crying, he's dead, he's dying. But in reality, he's walking out into the broad light, and he's going to be a human being, and this guy that's left in there is actually going to wither away and decay. So he talks about that. It's a very important idea. This will explain to you the idea of Yaakov Vinolo Meis. It obviously doesn't mean literally. It means to say that, as I once heard from Rav Hutner on this, he said, the Gemara says, Yaakov Vinolo Meis. The Gemara says, well, you funny? What do you mean? They emboweled, for goodness sake. You can't exactly embalm a living person, because part of embalming is taking out the blood. It'd be killing you. So Yaakov Vinolo Meis. No, so it says Mikra ani Doirish. How does that answer the question? You can make a lot of drushes. You say a sicha from the beam, or say what you want, but that doesn't make the dead into alive. This isn't like a Gimel Tammuz story. He's either alive or he's dead. What do you mean? No, he's dead, but Mikra ani Doirish. Hutner once explained, he said, just like in the Metzias, there's a mitzvah, just like in Torah. Torah is obviously is expression of the Chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The Chachma of HaKadosh Baruch Hu is also the tool used to create reality. That's what we say. Yistakel b'raisu b'ra'olma. Those who learn Ramban al-Torah in the Akdama know it means he looked into his primary Chachma and expressed that Chachma in creation. So just like his Chachma is expressed in a book called Torah, his Chachma is expressed in a sculpture called creation. So in other words, he's a multiple artist. He's an author. He does the plastic arts. Okay? So creation are his plastic arts, and the Torah is his book with the same eye, the same wisdom expressed in different places. That's what it means, Torah Kadma La'olam, by the way. Doesn't mean, well, he had Leisirtzach over there, so he had to create a Ritzach. He had Leisignev there, so he had to create a Jewish Ganav. No, it doesn't mean, it means the same Chachma, which is expressed in Leisirtzach, is expressed in the Chachma, in the world, and wherever it is, okay, whatever this is, it can mean in multiple definitions. So that's a davar pashut. So if that's the case, we understand that just like in Torah, this drash, this pshat, remez, drush, and sod, also in Metzias, there's a Metzias which is parallel to that Torah, which is called pshat, Metzias of drash, Metzias of drush, the different languages. For example, we say the malachim, the olam, in olam hanashamas. Where exactly is it? You look up. Where you going, man? Up. It's wherever this is at another dimension of reality. Like beforehand, you couldn't see germs. Today you can. Are germs in another reality? No, there. You just need you need other tools to be aware of them. It's another plane which is not part of your sensory experience. That's all it means. It's like dogs are very attuned to high-pitched sounds that you won't hear. Did you ever see a dog whistle? Okay, it puts a very high-pitched sound that a human being is not capable of hearing, but dogs go crazy. Do you know that bees are very sensitive to ultraviolet light? You want to get bees that bite, they shine ultraviolet, and they'll go after you. And they're very sensitive to that. You don't even see it. You know, we have different sensations. Our existence, what's your existence? It depends. It's describing a phenomena, a state of mind created by your sensory tools. That's what the word existence to you is. If you live more in your brain than your belly, you experience another world. If you live more in your belly than your brain, you have another world. The dog has another world of sound, and the bee has another world of sight. It's very clear. So, okay, so you have to understand, Olam Neshamas doesn't mean it's up somewhere. Up means it's a higher level of consciousness. When we say, you know, it's a Lamala, what do you mean Lamala? Where exactly? Does it take space? Is it on Jupiter? Is it on Saturn? No. First of all, it's a reality which doesn't take space. Okay, just like your soul is, so to speak, here, but it doesn't take space. Okay? All this Olam Neshamas is another level of reality, which is a profounder level of reality, which you have no tools of experiencing it. But it's here as much as you're here. I can't even say that we're here, because is the thought here? Does the thought take space? Thought doesn't take space. Yet you somehow say a thought is here. You say the soul is here, right? You say the soul is here. Did it take space? No. As much as that's true, you can also say Olam Haba is here. Olam Neshamas is here. Gavril and Michal are here. Yeah, it's another level of reality with other tools that you see other things and experience other things. I want you to understand that in profundity. So that's what we say when we say it is a reality of experience called pshat, which is your sensory reality. There's obviously the same language is also in pshat and remez, drush, and sod. So when he was asked the question, Yaakov Iloi Meis, so the guy originally thought, Ma, he didn't die. He's still walking the streets. He came in, he's dead. He says, yeah, you idiot. Mikra ani doirish. I'm talking about the concept of death and life in the level of consciousness called drush, not pshat. In the Olam HaMetzias, which is parallel to the Metzias of drush in the Torah, there he's alive. That's what it means. Mikra and Idash. Why? Because the Olam HaDrush defines life by legacy, by impact. Ma'azara b'chaim, afu b'chaim. What does it mean? Oh, if they're alive, he's walking, he's putting on tefillin? No, it means to say, if his children are alive and following his legacy, that is perceived, he's alive. Very similar to what the Rambam says here. Is Moshe Rabbeinu, Chazal say Moshe Rabbeinu lemeis, oimer m'shoros l'mala. Pasuk says he's dead. What does it mean? Al pi drush, he's alive. They're both true. That's what the Rambam infers here. In the Olam Pshat, if death here, life here means that we can experience him with our senses, he's dead. Can we experience him in his legacy or in his spiritual reality at other planes? Yes. At that plane, he's not dead. He's alive. There's only one person we know, what it says in Fush and Gemara, that used to come back to make Kiddush for his wife. It's a Ramban at the end of Parshas Vayechi. That Rabbeinu HaKadosh, after he was dead, his wife was Neba Chalon, so he used to come Friday night, used to go back into a goof, and she used to go make Kiddush for her. Interesting, Shallah, how is he might see her? I'm not going to, but it's a Ramban. The Ramban, you can read the Ramban Parshas. That's an interesting phenomenon. But that's not Yaakov Avinu lo meis. Yaakov Avinu Olam Pshat meis. Ba'olam HaDrush lo meis. Okay? Olam HaSoid never began to meis. You understand? Whatever Yaakov Avinu means at different levels, what the word life means at different levels, that's what the Rambam first here when he says, dead for us, but life for him. Because life means actually, there's a Shem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu called Elokim Chaim. Right? Shama Elokim Chaim B'der B'toich HaEsh. Elokim Chaim is the Shem, Ramchal says, is one of his drashes, that's the Shem of HaKadosh Baruch Hu Noisen Ator. Eitz Chaim, speaking by Elokim Chaim, the God's source of life, is the shame of the description of God giving Torah to the Jews, because that's what He's giving you. He's giving you a source of perpetual life. Eitz Chaim Hil Marzikim Ba. What does it mean? It means you're going to live forever? No, you're going to die. I thought Eitz Chaim means you live forever. It means life at another plane. That's what it means. You're going to continuously exist, but at another plane of awareness. That is a very important thing inferred in this Ram. Let's go for V'chein Amruch Ayolei Mashal Moshe Ben Eloi Meis. Ela Olo Mishamish B'Morim. That's what it means. The Ram, I don't think it means that he went up there like people think the Rebbe is still alive and he's reading Kvitlach and all you send him a note by opening even Igros. No, he's dead. Does he have an impact in this world? Yes, I think the Bavitcher Rebbe has a major impact in this world. Thousands of people are keeping Torah and mitzvahs because of him. That's he's alive. So I actually think the Chazon Ish is alive as far as that thing. I think, you know what I mean, the Alter Slabotka is alive. There's any people who impacted reality to which we begin in Mazar B'chaim, they're alive at that in a certain level of reality. But we have to say Kaddish, and we're Misabel, and there's a grave. Okay, and he's Mitama. Okay, weiter the Rambam. V'kasher meis olav hashalom, ukfar masali Yeshua pirushin shinitulai. Well, when he passed on, he had already transmitted to Yeshua all the Purushin that were given to him. So the whole base, the whole body of Torah Shabbat was already given to Yeshua. And once again, you think it was a one-time learning, this is what we have to say again. V'asku ba'hem Yeshua v'anshei Dora. They also continued learning. We have to get one thing in our minds, and that is that I'm not talking about the conditions of today and not talking about conditions of the Golus. But I would say the utopian condition of Klal Yisrael was supposed to be, if you're not busy in the farm, you're learning. Ad Kedei Kach, the Gemara says before, Medrash also said that Yeshua was going to be Nanesh and Chiyav Misa, because at night, after he had finished from the battle, he had time to learn and he didn't. He says, Sar Tzva, Hashem came to him and said, what do you want from me? And he says, no, and I'm coming because of B'dul Torah. Now, brother, I'm still wearing my fatigues, you know what I mean? Now you have time to learn. So we don't live in that culture, Le'aleinu le'aleichem, we live in a very imperfect culture. But as far as what we understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants, V'asavta t'ganecha tiresh v'tzarecha is tzuras HaTorah, we do that, right? But every time, the only reason we're allowed to do it, what does the Gemara say? Why are we allowed to do this? One pasuk says, Mefurish says, L'yasham yomash tefer te'ezah meficha. The other pasuk says, "V'asavta t'ganecha tzirashcha v'tzarecha." So there's a machlekes, Rebbe Elazar, Reb Shimon, how we interpret this. Reb Shimon simply says that l'yamash tefer te'ezah meficha is a utopian reality, which very few people can get to. Oisin ritzayna shel malka. And the other people, most people, can only get to V'asavta t'ganecha tzirashcha, and they can't do it 24/7 learning. What does it mean? It says people like Shimba Yochanan in the sun. What's called Eines and Son Shemakim? Rabbi Yochanan, you know what I mean? Rabbi Sheva, Seifer, Rabbi Yochanan Sandler, Rabbi Shua, big guy. He was a Bechami. All those poor Tanoim that worked for a living, they were called Eines and Son Shemakim. Yichel ki imorim. You know what I mean? So it means Eines and Son Shemakim means they attained a certain perfection that wow, God was going to support them totally. But the regular run-of-the-mill Tana. Love the word run-of-the-mill. Yeah, the regular, you know, Rabbi Yisenu, Chashos HaKabbalah, Tanoim, which each one of them could be Mechayim Mesim, Kimavur, and the Gemara, they had to go work. So that's what Shimon says. Says, the Psuk we're dealing with two different personalities. La'alacha, we don't pass on that. There's no real machlekes. He's just pointing out that's a reality. He's not saying what you should do. The only person which translates this in something normative, it's brought down La'alacha and Rambam Shulchan Aruch, it's Rabbi Shmuel. He says, no, they're talking about the same personality. See, what did Rabbi Shimon say? He said, they're talking about two different personas. That's all. There's a person which is shaykh to this, and the person which is shaykh to this. So I'm trying to say who's not shaykh. Rabbi Yeshua, Reish Lakish, Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Sheva Sefer, Shimon Son. I can go on and on and on with the list of Tanoim, which were menial labor. Hillel, Azaken, Nebuch was a woodchucker. Okay, it didn't take. We can go on and on. Reb Tarfon, which wasn't nana from any sort of kisser shotayra. So they did people that worked. As Ramam elaborates in Pirkei Avos on that. That's history that we know. So that's one yeshiva. What's the other yeshiva, Rabbi Shmuel? No, you're mekayim le'yomer sefer Torah b'picha by working. If you learn Rashi, I repeat, you have to read the Gemaras inside, not Latter-day Saints or translations in English, but read the Gemara and Rashi and Tosfos. That's what you do. Steht dort in Rashi, what's the Pshat in Rabbi Shmuel? It's not a steer because it's a kiyum. When you go to work, that's a kiyum of lo yomer sefer Torah b'picha. How is it possible? I am working from 9 to 5. The answer is very simple. Kol mi she'ein Torah she'ein mamalacha soifa betela. Why? Because it's going to be nitzach al abriyos. Okay? Therefore, in order not to be nitzach al abriyos, which creates an enormous amount of Torah betela, so every time you go to work, you're doing a mitzias which will allow you to whatever you learn to have. So that's a kiyum din of le'yomer sefer Torah mipicha. You may end up learning only an hour a day, but the work that you work during the day allows that hour to be contained, fulfilled, and not nitzach al abriyos. For Rashi, that's how he explains Hanig Bohem Minig Derech Eretz. What is Hanig Bohem? Bohem Bad Divrei Torah. Be manig in the Divrei Torah Minig Derech Eretz. Open up a Gemara in Brachas, you'll see it. Hanig Bohem Minig Derech Eretz. You must take the Divrei Torah and couple it with Derech Eretz in order to be Mishamer the Torah. That's how you're Mekayim, the pasuk of the Yom Sefer Torah. That's the pshat which the Rambam pasuk Halacha and the Shulchan Aruch bring. So obviously, but there's really no machlokes. There are people who somehow in their mind think there's a machlokes or a Shimon. I contest this vehemently, and I would suggest that any of you open the Gemara and see it, you would agree with me, but you most probably never did, or did it because I heard this, so that's what it says. No, walk in with your own 2 feet, and you'll see there's no machlokes. Based on Gemara, Rashi, and Tosfos, I'm not talking about what other people write. In Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos, there's no machlokes. Machlekes is not in halacha. Machlekes is how to say pshat in the pasuk. Is the pasuk, are these 2 psukim talking about 2 personas, or are they talking about 1? It's simple as that. That's a machlekes. That's all. Is that? But there's no machlekes practically what to do. It's never pashut. What are you going to do? Hanig ben min derech eretz. But there are people according to Shemir Yochai, which a mamish can be zoicha, that they won't have to be mishamer because they won't be nitzach al abrios, and somehow God will give them parnasa. The Radvaz brings down that the person, the din is a Talmud Chacham lechatchila. You should do business with a Talmud Chacham. When the social reality is the way it was, so every person made sure to do business with a Talmud Chacham in order that he should have an easy parnasa to spend most of his time learning. So many people went, do me a favor, I want to invest in your business. So everyone was investing in his business. He ended up having a nice clearinghouse, a nice brokerage. Everyone wanted to invest in his business, so he did well. Okay, Radvaz brings down when it says that the Shevet Levi, a person's Kosh Kedoshim, Shkosh Baruch will take care of his parnassus. The Radvaz says, the Rebbe of the Shittim Kvetz is the Rebbe of the Ari. Okay, so Radvaz says that it means he's going to do work, but the Kosh Baruch is going to be mizam him bracha in his work that he's going to be able to finance himself. That's what the Radvaz writes there, unfortunately, on the famous Ramam of Shevet Levi. Look it up. Most people don't look things up. Well, you should. So that's what we have over here. That's what happens. So look at these people. So these people, Anshe Dair means everyone was learning. We think, wow, the guy Mamish learned before davening. That was normal. Don't you understand that was normality? It was normal that you learn every minute you can, and when you can't, you have a matir. You're supposed to work, okay? But it's a matir. And why? It's not some matir, and that is a kiyum. You know why you're allowed to work? Because that will preserve the time that you're learning. That's called terascha kvar malachtacha. That's the heter of working. Working is an emtsoi to be mishamer the Torah you have. It's not just okay. I'm pater. No. That's the key. This is limud Torah. It's a hechsher mitzvah limud Torah. Hanig Bahem, Rashi's bad divrei Torah, minig derech eretz, in order that it should be mishumer. Look it up. It's an unbelievable Rashi, and no one argues with him. So Ad kan, I rest my case. So this is V'shtei Dam Mefurish. So he says, Yeshua v'Anshe Daira were also learning. So it wasn't just 40 years, it went on. Remember, I don't know when it stopped, and I do not know when people stopped learning. When did big Amaratzis come into Kal Yisrael? We know we have it, because we have Gemaras describing big the Amoritz Medrashim. We know during Bayit Sheni, there were tons of Amaratzis. We know that in Golis Bavel, there was tons of Amaratzis. People didn't even know Hebrew. The Amaratzis was terrible. At what stage did it happen? We know during Chizkiyahu Melech's period, there wasn't a child which wasn't a Baki and Tyrus. You understand? So obviously when everything was in normal position and religion was doing well, people were working, but they were Bakim, a little, they checked En Tinnik, Midan Vad Beersheva, which didn't know all this Nagoyim, Porah, and Tyrus. Have you ever learned it? Okay? There wasn't a Tinnik, it means before Bar Mitzvah. Bisman Yechizkiyahu Melech, which from Dan Vad Beersheva, which didn't know Tyrus clear. That's not bad. I understand if you knew Tyrus, somebody also knew himself the brachas. Okay, so, you know what I mean? He even knew Tyrus. That's a nice way of saying he knew Shas. Okay, it's very pashut because that was the Ikar Avodas Hashem. That was Limud HaTorah. When did it stop? When did it become not normal for a person working to be knowing Kol Torah Kula? It's you really wonder when it stopped. I don't know. It's an interesting question, but I'm trying to say something here. It went for a period of time that this whole nation, the 40 years in the desert we described learning, it actually continued. That's what I want to say. So my history is of it's almost like a Athenian dream of a nation of scholars. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? This is like Heidelberg. What can I tell you? It's like the old schools in Germany. Everyone's a doctor with a pensée, you know what I mean, with the clip on the nose, with the monocle. He looks good. They're big Talmidei Chachamim, and they're solid business people. Farmers, whatever they were doing. So that's what Rashi, Oskubim Yeshuva Anshe Doirei. Listen to the word Anshe Doirei and understand what it refers to. That's a national condition. That's an important insight. A big insight. Anything which is Kabbalah, there was no dialogue. Because they kept their historical tradition in a very intact way. They were very meticulous. There's been endless hours of doing, as the Rambam mentions later, each one of them reviewed everything minimum 100 times. Okay? So there was never a machlekes in the basic core of tradition. There's no machlekes. Period. But what about things they didn't hear? For example, the Navi said a din, and he said halachas, and now we have a new situation. We have to be able to apply it to a new situation. What do we do then? Well, then you have your Yud Gimel Midas. You have Svara to conceptualize something, then to draw in or be an Av. There are many ways of doing these things, but that's already human interpretation. Naturally, there's going to be different views. So where the machlekes exist, not in the core of the tradition, no, there's no machlekes in history. What your Torah Sheba'al Peh is not based on scholarship or Yalfusid, it's based on history. Very important thing to chap, how your Yiddishkeit is heavily, almost all of it is based on history. Okay? The importance of understanding the Shashos Kabbalah is crazy here, because they are carrying a body of history. Now, there's no argument. There was never historically an argument if Ayin Tachas Ayin meant if Mammon Katzoy says Kappa meant it. There was never an argument that a Sukkah is Shiva al Shiva and Rem Yud. There was never an argument that Tefillin look the way they look. There was an argument in which Seder of the parashas. That's interesting to know why and how that occurred. It's really interesting. How could it possibly occur? Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam, what the Seder of the parashas, how could historically that happen? Open up your tefillin. That's an issue which has to be dealt with, but not today. But that's a very interesting topic. The one who wrote on this at length was Rabbi Menachem Kasher. Goyen Olam was the author of Torah Shleima. I don't know if you ever saw it. The guy called Torah Kula, you know. So he has a book called Toldos Menachem, I think it's called, the Chuvas, big Chuvas Sefer. And it's a big kuntras on this, on the Machlekes and Tefillin. Bli neder, Eshna Perek Zeh, but it's not as if these questions are new. They're old news, and there's a lot of literature on it. So going on further, Mashaloi shamu min hanavi yesh b'si'ifav masah matan, v'nilmad by hadin b'darkei ha'iyun, and the way we learned the halacha was through using conceptual thought. What were our tools? Shlosh Yisrei, midah shenitla b'sinai. Kadosh Baruch Hu gave tools of how to read the Chumash through the Shlosh Yisrei midah, 13 ikrim. V'zeh shlosh midah she'ater nidresh b'hem. Umosan dvarim shelamdu. Now, let's say the things that we did learn with the 13 principles of hermeneutics. So, yeshin yanim shalom nafam machlokas. There were xeris shavas or biyanavs, which everyone accepted. We have no mucker that argues that communication issue with kesef. No one argues. There's never a machlokes. There's a shaila. Which pasuk is from nafkemina? The Gemara says tzricha. You need both. There's also a Gemara which deals with this, but in principle there was never a machlokes. You can kaddish issue with kesef. That's Yud Gimel Midas. So that's clear. That's no machlokes. Eliskimu kulam aleim umehem. But there's multitudes of things that we learned through Yud Gimel Midas. Shenaflu ben machlokes. There was arguments. So what's the halach? Bein shtei deyos. Zedon bedin v'nischazek etzlo. One person made the afusa and became very convinced that what he's saying is right. Zedon bedin v'nischazek etzlo. And it's logical. It has to be that way. While if you should darkei kesh avikuchiyim yikru b'totzotam amikrim me'elo. Because when we talk about logical deduction, it is natural that two minds, which are conditioned from two different experiences in life, will deduce possibly two total opposites from the same way of thinking. We're not on the same wavelength. So one Rishon will say it's wrong, the other one will say it's wrong, and vice versa. One Tana will say it's usually midas, every usually midas, or machlokes. Abayid is one. These are all shilas and shikul das, and our das is different. So he says, in that case, what do we do? I think I explained this in Shur, but it has to be clarified again. The majority doesn't tell us what the academic truth is. It's left non-known. The majority says what becomes normative. And what becomes normative becomes Torah, because Torah doesn't just mean Bible. Torah, Rashi writes in Brachas, that Yud Aleph and Beis means Hayra, practical halacha l'maisa. Hayra. Masha, the Gemara there has a shaila. What do you make birchas Torah on? Originally, the Gemara thought you only make birchas Torah on mikra, or on anything which is meforish as a mikra. Medrash, Mishnah is meforish as a mikra. But Gemara says, well, Gemara is not meforish as a mikra. Gemara goes in somersaults all over the world. How many people even get close to the Chumash when they read a Gemara? You see, Gemara wants to say that you don't make birchas Torah on Gemara. Finally, the Gemara says you do make a birchas Torah on Gemara, and there's a machlokes Rashi and Rabbeinu Yoinu. Why? Rabbeinu Yoinu says because at the end of the day, through Gemara, we understand the mikra. This svara comes from a kal v'chomer, which came from a mikra. So that mikra gave me this kal v'chomer, and now I have this new din. So it is using the word interpretation, a very broad usage. Somehow, that's what Rabbeinu Yoinu says. The problem with that lies, for example, in Masechtas Eruvin, which is all drabbanos, or Masechta Bava Basra, which is no deraisa there. Okay, and Rambam points out Bava Basra doesn't have deraisas, so it's pretty hard to understand unless it falls under the category of asisas ayosher v'satoiv. Maybe, but Eruvin, what are you going to do? Okay, half a bracha says a guy said drabbanon. Which pasuk are you fulfilling there? Which are you for teaching? It's a very shver Rabbeinu Yoinu. I'm not doing a shir now, but that is I would say Rashi disagrees, and I understand why Rashi disagrees. Rashi says, no, originally we thought the Torah meant the historical Torah, the Mikra from Sinai. They say, no, Torah doesn't mean that. Birchas Torah is not for the historical Torah Sinai. Torah miloshen hira. Tachlis, I need a guidebook how to normatively act. Any book which will teach you how to normatively act as a Jew is called Torah. Rashi, brachas, try looking it up. It's a nice book to learn, okay? At that level, yeah, so even a drabanan, I need to know what to do. So that's called Torah. So Basra is Torah, Eruvin is Torah. For Birchas Torah, Torah is Miloshen Hira. That's the Lashon of Rashi there. So this is similar over here too. But when we say Acharabim Lahatos, it doesn't mean to say that you've told you what did God mean, academically. It means that's what God wants you to do. That's what the Rav tells you to do. The biggest raya is that we're chayshish for a das miyut, b'shas adchak. Or, for example, we have rubais which hypothetically can be overturned. Did God change his mind? Is the truth change his mind? A Rav can be overturned too. There are multiple possibilities of such things in Rav. And I'm not going into Pirtei Halachas because you're knowledgeable enough. But reality is, Rav is not a Machri of Emes. Rav tells you how to act. So that's what it says here. I think we have a few more minutes. V'da, sha'nevuah lo to'il bi'iyum b'pirish haTorah. Important thing to know, that prophecy won't help you. The prophet will come and tell you pshat in a pasuk. A prophet will come al pi nevuah. A prophet will come and tell you a pshat in a halacha al pi nevuah. He's a navi sheker. There's a big question asked how many people say teku, and they somehow Shmuel and Nugget writes. What does teku mean? You know what teku really means? Teku means, it's from the word tekum. It stands. The question is still standing. That's what it means. It's still it's like, remember in Parliament, he's still standing. We didn't push him down. He's still standing. The opposite of esfei, of tifta. Teku, sheshet. It means the question is still standing. That's the truth. Now, we know that Bisman HaGoinim, they also told the Shmuel Nugget writes, it also says Rashi types of Tishbi Yitaris Kushis V'Abayis. Eliyahu will answer, will solve our problems. What do you want from Eliyahu? The poor guy, if he does Al Pi Navi, he's a Navi Shekel, Chayv Misa. Was Vista from Eliyahu? Does that Chayv Misa? So you gotta come, if this acronym is correct, which once again, no, that's not a Gemara, it's Shmuel Nugget saying that this is what he heard. So you can take it with a certain amount of reservation, but if it's correct, people discuss this with Rabbi Pesach Frank, Rabbi Sivalman in Ibn Ozel, in the back of Hilchas Malachim, I think in the appendixes at the end of the book. He has a letter there to Rabbi Pesach on this topic. It simply means we figure that Eliyahu is going to be a big Talmud Chacham. And since he's the first guy waking up before the dead, okay, he's the first guy that shows up. Oh, finally, we have a guy that knows something. So that's all it means. Something that we figure he's knowledgeable enough to answer all these questions. But with Rayas, he's going to have to do lumdus, and you're going to be able to argue with him. Because once he's not a Pinavi, you can argue with him. The only thing, we figure he's going to be so heavy in Torah that he's going to be able. It's very nice to know that we're not looking at Eliyahu as a Navi here. We're looking at is the real big samuch, if I may say it, prior to anybody else waking up. That's the pshat in that take. Okay, I think you have to go to Mincha.